Okay, so first we're going to start prepping her skin with the MAC Prep and Prime Natural Radiance. This to me is more like a moisturizer than a primer, so this is suitable for all skin types. I pretty much put it on everybody. We're going to start with her brows. First I brush them up and into place. We're using a little bit of Brun eyeshadow, and this is going to help us create a nice full brow but without being too strong and defined, because she already has a really beautiful eyebrow shape. So what we want to do is just wiggle the brush through and make sure it gets in between the sparse areas, and then towards the front of the brow go ahead and start to create a little bit more brow hairs to fill it in. I'm going to be using some Graftobian foundation palette cream foundations to highlight under her brows. This is my favorite product. I'm just using a little 242 brush from MAC, and then dipping into some soft ochre paint pot to prime the lids. Feel free to add a generous amount of this and just make sure it's nice and evenly placed on there. Using a flat brush, you can use your finger, you can use a fluffy brush, doesn't really matter. Next, what I like to do is just set the eyes, and this way the shadows are going to go over a lot more smoother. So I like to set it with some Studio Fix powder by MAC, using the fluffy brush that I'm going to start using for the eyeshadows. We're going to dip into the Friendcation palette and dip into the lightest brown shade in there. What we're going to do is start to buff it in to the crease and the outer corner of the eye. And doing a look like this is very like multi-dimensional, so it's got lots of layers to it. This is going to be our first layer. You just want to make sure that everything is applied generously and make sure that it is blended. So just keep going back over and over and over. Make sure that there's no harsh lines. Next, we're going to dip into the medium brown shade in here. This one is called Churro. And I'm taking a smaller, more defining brush. This one is a 221 brush by MAC. This is beautiful to do like detail work, crease work. So this way it's not overly fluffy and it's going to put the product where we need it. And I am bringing the shadows out a little bit. If you see it, we're almost kind of winging it out just a little bit. And then I like to go back over with that first brush and make sure that everything is blended. You're doing extra blending to create a really blown out look. So lastly, we're going to dip into the deepest shade in the palette, and that's going to be placed over that last churro color. So this way, again, we're building on the dimension of this and creating the smokiness in the outer corners of the eyes. Now we're going to add on the lid color. This is Dirty Money. This is one of my favorite shades in here. But you know what? I honestly don't think that these guys were meant to work with a brush, which is why I switched over to using the pad of my ring finger. And this color is just beautiful. It's intense. All these foiled colors in here have tons of reflect in them, and they do not even need a base or an adhesive. Now we're just lining her eyes with a little bit of brush black liner from MAC. This is going to hide our lash band, and it's going to help us start to achieve the smoky wing shape that we're going to be doing next. So this is my favorite black ever. This one is super duper intense. I'm using it on a pencil brush from MAC. I believe it's a 219. And what I'm doing is placing the color in using the tip of the brush and then buffing it out using the previous blending brush that I have. I have pretty light pressure when I'm using this because blacks can get very intense and out of control if you're doing too much too fast. So what I'm doing is using the belly of the brush to get the product on there and using the tip of it to start to blend and create my shape outwards. Then make sure you go back and blend it. So we're using some Ardell. These guys are some double up lashes. I think they're like double wispies. Before I apply the lashes though, I make sure that I'm going to clean up the under eyes, and this is also helping me create that winged out shape and getting a nice and defined angle on the corner of the eyes. Just applying the lashes on with a little bit of duo. So now we're applying her foundation. I'm using a mixture of 2 shades of Sheer Glow from NARS on her using a damp beauty blender. We're using Fiji and Stromboli and just pouncing it onto the skin. She already has really beautiful skin, but she's a little bit on the drier side. So this foundation is perfect for her skin type. Now we're gonna use a little shape tape. This one is in, I believe it is light neutral sand, and we're applying this underneath her eyes in an upside down triangle. We're going to apply it down the bridge of the nose and then a little bit on the forehead. While I'm going to let that tart shape tape sit there, we're going to do some LA Girl Beautiful Bronze to contour her a little bit. Her forehead's rather small, so we are just doing the very top of it and then creating a nice little cinched nose contour for her. And then using the same beauty blender, we're going to go and buff in that contour. So I don't typically use beauty blenders too much. I like to use brushes for my makeup application, so this is me practicing some cream contour techniques using a beauty blender, and I like it. It wasn't bad. It's very soft. It gives you a very like red carpet looking blend. So for our under eyes, we are going in, and again, I'm not using the beauty blender for this part. I'm using a brush because I like everything to stay put. I don't want any of my product to be absorbed, and we're just pressing it into the skin. This is just a flat brush, which was discontinued by MAC, but I'm sure that there are lots of dupes out there for it. And then using the Dose of Colors, it's one of their shader brushes. We're gonna go ahead and buff in the cream contour on her nose. And I'm just kind of pushing it in, pushing it down the nose, and then bringing it up and almost into the shape of her eyeshadows that are in the crease of her eyes. And then next we're going to go in and press in her nose highlight and make sure everything is nice and blended. So before we set the under eyes, always make sure to go back and buff out any creases that may have settled in the concealer. That is a very, very, very important step. And then you can use a brush, or like me, I'm using the beauty blender. I like to use this to apply loose powder. We're doing Laura Mercier translucent loose powder under her eyes. I don't like to use too much, and I don't like to leave it on too long, just enough to make sure that the concealer is set. And then go in with a little bit of NC20 Studio Fix powder. This is on a MAC 116 brush, and I'm just kind of buffing away some of that excess loose powder, and I'm just setting her in the center of her skin. Again, her skin's a little bit drier, so it's not necessary to powder the entire face. Now, I don't typically like to pick up a different brush for every single portion of the skin, so I'm going to use the same brush that I set her with to buff in her powder bronzer, and this one is Dark Tan Mineral Skin Finish by MAC. So we're just kind of lightly applying it over where that cream contour was in every area to make sure that everything is nice and softly diffused. So now we're going to go back to her nose, and using the same shader brush, just buff in a little bit of the dark tan. Next is highlight. We are using Fuego from the DesixKaty first round of their collection, and this one came back again into their second. So on all the high points, We're gonna line her waterline with a little bit of black eyeliner. So for the under eyes, I'm using a small shader brush from Morphe. And this, I'm just taking that last dark brown shade that I was using on her eyes and just pressing it in underneath. So make sure you don't wiggle the brush around too much because you don't want fallout. We're just patting and pressing it in. For the lips, we are using Spice Lip Liner by MAC. This one is a really good liner for pretty much all the shades of the lip products that are in this collection because they are all just like warm, almost peach browns, like a little bit leaning on the terracotta color. So they just kind of work with everything. We are using My Main liquid lipstick from the collection. This is my favorite color. I love it. It just hits all the peach tones that I love, but more on the neutral side. And then we're going over with the Most, which is the second gloss created in this collection. It has like a pink pearl reflect in it, which is really pretty. Then we're gonna set with some Fix Plus, and then we're gonna fan her and make sure everything is nice and dry. And then after that, we're gonna apply some mascara. This is a really good mascara if you need something that's not going to move from your bottom lash line, and always apply it after Fix Plus because you don't want it to run. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this look as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. Make sure you hit subscribe, and then we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.